David, the RJC is probably the best organization that we have related to ethical issues, responsible. And so I question, and ask, and I'm not attacking everyone here. It's true, I'm taking away this holy grail called the Kimberley process, but your organization, the RJC, and also Signet, you're trying to be very important leadership about putting ethical issues into the equation of what is a legitimate or responsible supply chain. And you've done so much good work there. Now, you've had the situation where the RJC has been hit or has been directed by this Russian scenario. It's a shock. No one expected Russia to do that, to invade the Ukraine, really. And now, the RJC went through some kind of a bump with that, with a number of organizations leaving and now coming back, which I'm happy to hear. And you're sort of our best hope. But two real focused questions. First of all, does the RJC prohibit their members from selling Russian source diamonds? That's one question. And it's okay if not. We do what we do. We don't do what we don't do. It's all right. And if in fact that is the case, what's the RJC doing now that Richemont is coming back? Will you be able to expel members who violate your standards? Will you have ethical standards? Do you believe that the RJC should go beyond the limits of the law so that we can have a certain standardized ethical thing, human rights abuses, for example, whatever, that we can do more? And maybe what role can the RJC play in making sure that members don't deal in blood diamonds or don't do that? And what can we do here? I think we're in a transition period. I think we've been woken up by this Russian scenario, and I'm hopeful that now that we've gone through this catharsis, that maybe there's some really good solutions from the RJC. So over to you, David.
Great, thank you. I just want to make sure you can hear me again. Okay, great, thank you. Look, I'm going to answer your questions with a little bit of a story as well. In 2010 and up to that, companies in the US started to hear about legislation that was going to affect gold. And we didn't really understand it. But the Dodd-Frank Act became a catalyst for US industry, primarily the jewelry industry and the electronics industry, to come together and create steps around companies conducting due diligence. And that's when I learned about the Organization for Economic and Cooperative Development, the OECD. Okay? And that is the answer. And the fact of if you give me some time here, I'll be glad to explain it. And that's what our 4-layered system at Signet is about. And that's what the system of warranties does at the World Diamond Council, that builds on the Kimberley process. And that's what the Signet Responsible Sourcing Protocol does. So those are the 4 layers. I encourage anybody to go to signetjewelers.com. You can read it. You can go to signetresponsiblesourcing.com. I'll say it one more time, signetresponsiblesourcing.com. And you can learn about all the steps that are necessary to provide the kind of assurances around human rights that you're talking about. It's not solved by one organization. It's not solved by the KP alone, as you rightly say. We at the WDC have been fighting that for 20 years. 20 years, all right? So we've learned that the definition is very myopic. It talks about diamonds that are funding civil wars. That's occurring in the CAR, right? But what do we do about other human rights abuses? That's why the WDC, realizing that challenge, worked on the new system of warranties, which were introduced 2 years ago and are now throughout the organization. It requires auditing, no question about it. Now, if companies aren't aware of it, that's problematic. If companies aren't auditing, that's problematic. And then next, you have to be, if you're going to work with another company, how are you going to know that company? I'm going to use your term, kosher is non-kosher. That's what the RJC does. It has 5 areas that include human rights. It talks about the company's business practices, not the product, the company's business practices. And that's auditable. And you have to be audited in order to be a certified member, and we have many, many certified members and over 1,600 and growing members from around the world, okay? And then lastly, again, the Signet Responsible Sourcing Protocol. Jewelers of America has another protocol called the Diamond, Ronnie's there, he can explain it, but it's similar. And the best thing about all these programs is that they are public and they're open source, and any company around the world can copy and use them. We encourage them. We help build them with great companies like De Beers and the company you mentioned earlier, Alrosa, as well, a great company, okay, who participated in helping develop the system of warranties to the point that it is right now. So it is a magnified, is an amplification on each step to come to this, the company's point of view about what degree do they want to take. It's not up to the KP. It's not up to the WDC or the RJC or Signet. It's up to the people who are the companies that are buying the diamonds to determine what's your criteria. Do you want human rights? Do you care? If you care, ask your suppliers. If you ask your suppliers, if you're an RJC member, that ought to tell you something right away. If they don't even know what you're talking about, that ought to tell you something right away. If they're not part of a trade association, great organizations like JA, great organizations like AGS, great organizations like JBC, okay, that ought to tell you something. And if they're not part of the IDMA and DIMIA and the World Federation of Diamond Bourses, that ought to tell you something. So these are just some very basic steps that people can take to learn about where they're getting their diamonds from, the companies they're getting their diamonds from. And if you're not satisfied with those answers, run. That's where you start. So that's what the RJC is doing. We're trying to promote OECD due diligence guidance throughout the organization, throughout the supply chain, at the building on the KP, building on it through RJC, building on it through the SRSP. That's how companies can achieve what you're talking about, to make sure that these blood diamonds, and I'm with you on blood diamonds. I go by the common sense, the definition of a conflict diamond. So do our customers, all right? They don't know that it's limited to a very myopic definition. They don't care. We know that it's the same definition you and I have, Martin, and everybody else on this call, when we talk about human rights and what a conflict diamond really is. It ought to respect human rights. And if it doesn't, it ought not to be in our supply chain. But if people aren't going to ask and do their own due diligence and audit against it, then that's what's needed to eliminate them. With regards to the Richemont Group and the Kering Group, there were 24 companies within those groups that resigned. And within a matter of weeks, they all rescinded their resignations. And we're happy with that, okay? Because we have a process at the RJC. And it's an ICO accredited organization. It's a legal entity based in London. And it's 17 years old. It has a very long history of dealing with crisis and change and evolution in our industry. And it will continue to evolve. And what we're doing right now with the Kering Group, the Richemont Group, some from the LVMH, and many other of our companies, members and board members of the RJC, is conducting what we're calling a governance task force. We're looking at our bylaws. We want to make sure the next time an unprecedented event occurs, that we have the authority, the legal authority, because it does matter, the legal authority to make a change and make either expel or suspend a member. And 2 months ago, we did not have that. And that's the process we're going through. We made that commitment publicly. You're a member of the RJC. You've gotten every single one of our member communications. And that's our commitment. So we're going to be working with them over the summer. We anticipate by the end of the year to update our bylaws so that we have the authority for any unprecedented event to occur in the future that would give the RJC board and its executive committee and its officers the ability to either expel or suspend members based on factors that, again, such as in this case, were simply unprecedented. Fariel, do you want to add anything else?
On the RJC, I think you covered it well. The only thing that I would say is that it's very easy to criticize and judge. I think the main criticisms were RJC wasn't communicating, it was acting too slow. RJC is a large organization. It's got 1,600 members, but it's managed by quite a small, tight team. And the board is board members that donate their time voluntarily and have a day job. Actually making a decision, getting the board together in the backdrop of a geopolitical situation that was changing, I would say every week, if not every other week in the UK, in the US, well, it was quite tough. I can say that I witnessed the team working flat out, and decisions were made within weeks and months and communicated. So easy, as I said, to just make a blanket statement and attack, but really very hard to think it through and understand the challenges of the RJC. And actually, once you do understand it, you'll see that they were quite efficient in making decisions, understanding what had happened. And actually, I don't see it as a failure at all. I see that with every single time we face these headwinds, we learn something new and we make changes so that we can do things better in future. That's what I witnessed. Thanks, David.
So there's one thing I just wanted to mention earlier. Sorry. Earlier you had mentioned, before David had spoken, about hearing that I guess it's the WDC and civil society, that we go to the Kimberley process and that we're going to change the definition. We're going to change it. This is the year we're going to change it. That's incorrect. Every year we go to intersessional and we go to plenary with the hopes that we can convince governments to change the definition. And because it's so difficult in changing, because of consensus, and for those of you that may not know what consensus means, it means that everybody needs to have thumbs up, one person thumbs down, and it's not passed. I will say that we have the revised system of warranties where we have strengthened the definition through the revised system of warranties, where Elodie has gone and spoken around the world about the revised and encouraging those to sign up and do the system of warranties. So as Feriel and as David had said all along, we're looking at this, and each time, Mike, we're trying to push forward. We're trying to make things happen, and we're committed to it. But it is, even if we take our organizations collectively, it's very difficult because we are, if you look at the organizations collectively, a small team. But somebody who has the power of the pen and that can help support these organizations, all right, and get it out there, because then we have those working from the bottom up to support us, that would help in a positive way.
Good points. I think that the idea that the Kimberley process doesn't certify blood diamonds is false. I think the idea that the Kimberley process is going to change the definition is false. I think any normal person with any level would understand that that's not going to happen. Zimbabwe is not going to vote with everybody else out there that they have to stop their merengue deals with the Russians or anyone else. So the realistic scenario is that this is not going to happen. But the realistic situation of consumers needing to buy diamonds that are kosher, that exists. All the KP, WDC, ABC, JA, very interesting, very nice. But the bottom line is, are we going to be able to provide consumers with legitimate diamonds that we know for sure are okay? I think we will be able to for a limited amount of diamonds. Maybe the De Beers diamonds, or maybe other places if we whitelist mines, which is where we're going to go, okay? But the real question back to you, David, again is, if I'm a jeweler in the United States of America, and again, I'm not damning you or saying you're bad. You're doing the best you can. You're a nice person. I got people work for me. They're great people. They can't fly 777s. I don't know hold it against them. Okay, they do what they can do, and what they can't do, they don't do. Now, if I'm a jeweler in the United States of America, one of the 62% that answered, our ABNet members at least, I know they were jewelers, we do not want to buy Russian-sourced diamonds. Can you say to me that if I'm going to be buying diamonds from another RJC member, I'm covered? I mean, because, you know, or maybe not, and if it's okay if not, but, you know, where does the RJC help me if I'm a jeweler and I want to know that the guy's an RJC member, and therefore I can say, no, don't worry about it. We have some kind of an ethical standard. Maybe it's about Russian diamonds, maybe it's not about Russian diamonds, maybe it's something else. But does the RJC have any positions? And you say OECD's guidelines. Guidelines. That's another one of those phrases like, you know, conflict diamonds. And, you know, are those guidelines real standards? Is there anyone that you can expel for not following OECD guidelines? But I'm not attacking you. I'm asking very simple. Does the RJC have ethical standards that transcends the law? That's the first question. And can I rely on the fact that someone is an RJC member when I'm dealing with this Russian issue as an example? And it's okay if not, but I would like to ask that. Back to you. And we don't hear you. We don't hear you. We don't hear you. We don't hear you.
So, I just want to make sure you can hear me. Okay, great, thanks. Again, the RJC is in this layered approach. I think it's important to remember you have a Kimberley process, you have a system of warranties, you have an RJC, and you have a company management system, an inventory management system, such as an SRSP. I've given you the websites to go learn about it. I'll say it again, signetresponsiblesourcing.com. It's all laid out there. So the RJC role is to first advise its members to follow the law of the land. Okay, and right now, the US is the only country with sanctions on Russian goods from Russian entities. Okay, and the UK has some financial sanctions. But other than that, though, there are no other sanctions on Russia. So how does an American jeweler then comply to our law of the land? I can only explain what we're doing at Signet. Okay, and what we're doing at a Signet is we have our SRSP. Our SRSP is an auditable program. That's what makes it different as well. And for example, it's been including OFAC sanctions Zimbabwe diamonds for more than 10 years. All right. It also includes making sure we don't get rubies from Burma or Myanmar. Okay, etc. But when February 24th happened, we added Russian diamonds as an exception, not just Russian diamonds, but Russian precious metals and precious stones to the SRSP. We communicated that to our suppliers. Now, some retailers in the US did what I call a paper tiger. They sent a piece of paper, you mentioned this earlier, they sent a piece of paper that says, hey, or sign here that says you don't sell me any Russian goods. Now, that's the minimal foundation basic of a legal protocol. And that may work for them. It doesn't work for us, all right? And we have hundreds and hundreds of suppliers. So we've sent our communication to our suppliers. Now we're going through and we're auditing those suppliers to make sure they receive that communication. And they're telling us truthfully and transparently where they're getting their diamonds from, just like they've been doing for 8 years. That's how long the SRSP has been in place, okay? They tell us whether or not, and we know whether or not they're RJC members, okay? So the auditing of RJC, the auditing of the SRSP is what is really, really important. And the companies, if you're an American jeweler and you're not a member of RJC and you're looking for an assurance, the best place to go is to an RJC member. That's your best bet, because everybody, a certified member on the RJC website, has been through auditing. They understand what it takes, for example, to be a Signet supplier, a De Beers site holder, an Alrosa Alliance member. Okay, so these are companies that are used to protocols and they're used to auditing. So that's what the role of the RJC is. And I'm trying to give you tangible means of, if you're an American jeweler, of what to do to make sure and give your own customers an assurance that you're not selling Russian goods, is to ask your suppliers, Make sure they understand the policy. Ask them what they're doing. Now, if they can't answer those questions, then that's a red flag. And that's what OECD due diligence guidance is, Martin. That's what it's called. It's a 5-step program. And it begins by asking questions. And if you're dealing with people that won't even answer the first question, that should be a red flag. Now, the way we work at Signet with OECD DDG is we go through the first 3 questions. And we have in the past identified red flags for us. Myanmar and the human rights abuses that are occurring in Burma right now and have now been for almost a decade are a red flag for us. So we put out guidance to our suppliers. We don't want Burma rubies. We don't want any gemstones that come from Burma/Myanmar, okay? And as you know, they go off to Thailand to be cut, right? But they're trackable. They're trackable because of inclusions, okay? So by, again, understanding the supply chain, we can put those kinds of steps in place by working with responsible suppliers that are certified members of the RJC, okay? That's how you do it. And if American jewelers are looking for the best step forward, is not to throw stones at the KP, it's not to throw stones at the WDC, it's to, and if they can't join the RJC, at least go to the website, and there's 1,600 members there that are going through the due diligence to meet the auditable standards, the gold-plated standards that protect human rights. That would be my best advice to somebody who's who's an American jeweler who's not an RJC member. I hope that's helpful.
It's helpful, but